Hello everyone, this is James from 3D Printing Reviews and welcome to part 4 of my NFire1 upgrade series. In part 4 we're going to be having a look at the wire, or some of the wiring. So this is like a part 1 of the wiring, and basically what we're going to look at is the wiring for the power supply cover, so the cover I made in the previous part, and how to wire that up and connect it to the power supply, and how to also wire up the amp and voltmeter. So I can show you that actually working today, and we're going to talk briefly about how I'm going to wire the heated bed with the SSR, and how that's going to all connect up to the power supply and the ramps board. We're going to also have a look at how we're going to sort of neaten up the wiring as well. So we're going to have some conduit, and we've got some 3D printed clips as well. So what we'll do is we'll just briefly, I just want to have a look at the 3D modular systems thing on Thingiverse again. This is the power supply cover that we based ours on, or mine on. And what I wanted to show you actually is he has done a video, or 3D Modular Systems has done a video on how to wire up the inlet. So if we just briefly watch this video, if I just skip forward a touch, you can see here that he's putting a fuse into the inlet, because that doesn't actually come with one. Let's skip forward a little bit more. You can see here that he's wiring up his inlet. So we've got the earth cable here, and then he's created two small pieces of wiring with a connector on the end, and this is to do some wiring for the, so this will be the actual inlet socket on the other side. Let me just skip forward a little bit more. So you can see here that they are now plugged in, and then this wire coming off is one that will actually plug into the power supply, as will the earth wire. And then there's one more lead to go in there, which is the neutral connector. So there we go. So that is basically how to wire up the inlet socket, and I will show you mine when we switch over to the other camera. So yeah, what I also wanted to have a look at while we're on this screen is, you can see here, this is how the cover was originally designed to have the wires coming out. Now on my cover, I had to do some slight modifications. So I've got the inlet as you saw, and then basically all of this section has changed. So we've got a large display here, a small logo here, and then we've got a blank space here. So what I plan to do is drill some sort of hole here for the conduit to poke into. Now whether I'm going to have like a bracket to hold it, or it's just going to be a friction fit, I'm not entirely sure yet. So I will have the wiring come out the front, but you won't be able to see individual wires. So if I just click over to this picture, you can see how it's mounted. So this is basically the top of the printer, and the power supply is sort of pointing up like that. So my display is on this side, and then we'll have a hole here for the conduit. So the conduit will just come out at the top, and the actual distance between the top of the power supply and where the ramps board is not very long at all. So it will look quite neat. You won't have to have large bits of conduit. So yeah, so that's basically just a quick look at the actual cover we made. What we'll do now is we'll switch over to another camera, and we'll have a closer look at the finished wiring for the power supply cover, and placement and wiring for the heated bed. Okay, and here we are with the looking at the wiring for the power supply cover. So I'm not sure if you're about to see into there. Let's have a look on the camera. What I'll do actually is, if I take the socket out, we can have a look at the wiring a bit better. So there you can see, let me just focus that. There we go. So there you can see my version of the wiring, which is basically identical to that of 3D Modular Systems. So we have our earth cable here, our neutral loops. This is then our live and then neutral again. So that is basically how it was wired up in the video you just saw. So that then fits perfectly into the front of our power supply cover, just like that. And then if we have a look at the wiring for the amp and voltmeter, now I won't be able to take this out unfortunately because it's quite hard to get in and out. But what I've basically done is taken one of the ground wires from the main connector and put a terminal on, and then the two voltage wires, so that's the voltage wire for powering the display and the wire for measuring the voltage of whatever you're measuring, are joined together into a single connector. And then this blue cable that you can just see here, this is the one that measures the amperage, so that's not currently connected to anything, but that will be solely connected to the bed wiring, so that's only going to measure the amp draw of the heated bed. I don't think I showed this in the video. I think I posted a picture on my Instagram account, but you can see here that I've added some Sugaru to the NFire lab logo. We'll just try and get that to focus in, and if we up the ISO, see if we can get a better view of it. Actually, what I'll be better off doing, I think, is if I zoom in, there we go, so that's a little bit better. Technology doesn't like to work on camera, I find, or doesn't want to work live. There we go, that's the best we're going to get it. So as you can see, that actually looks really cool and looks as if it should actually be there rather than something that we've 3D printed. So I'm really happy with how that's come out actually. So yeah, so what I'm going to do now is if I just attach this to the terminals on the power supply. So these here are the screw terminals for our power supply. So I'll hook all those up and then we can actually have a look at the power supply turned on and see what it looks like. Okay, what I'm briefly going to show you here while we're after I've now wired up the meter, is actually all it does is, so the wires are attached to there and they sort of bunch up a little bit, and then there's two mounting holes on this side and one on this side, and what I've got to do is actually also attach at the same time the bracket I made in the previous episode, and this is what allows us to attach the power supply to the 2020 aluminium extrusion. So I'll just attach that and wire up or screw into the cover. Okay, so there you can see that I've now attached the cover, the side mount, and then also here we have the bottom mount, which also attaches to the extrusions with this small T-nut. So yeah, so that's basically the finished power supply cover. I've obviously got to screw in the connector here. Let me just up that ISO slightly. and focus. So yeah, I've got to screw that in, and then this is the area that I'm thinking of adding the hole for the conduit, and this is the conduit itself. So this is I believe a 9mm inner diameter. So if there was a hole in the top there, that would just sit in there like that. And this is while the power supply is basically attached to the frame like that. So let's power on the display, and you can see, or power on the power supply, and you can see the display working. One thing I just do want to briefly say about these types of power supplies is that most of them have two different inputs, either 110 volts, which is America, and then 220, which is the UK, Europe, etc. So it's very important that you make sure that this is set to 220 volts if you're in the UK, because otherwise you'll have magic smoke come out. So let's just grab a power cable, which I have here. This is switched off. So if we then plug in the cable like that, and then just switch it on, and then you can see we're reading 13 volts. Obviously the amp is 0 because we're not measuring anything at the moment. Now the reason that is on 13 volts and not 12, this is a 12 volt display, but there's a small potentiometer on the circuit board that allows you to make slight adjustments if it's out by a couple of volts or whatever. The reason I'm running at 13 volts rather than 12 is that when you have wiring to a heated bed, you're going to lose a little bit of voltage through the wiring. So what I'm going to do is run it at 13 volts in the hope that the bed will get its full 12 volts. Now I've made sure that the ramps board and anything else that we're going to power is capable of handling the 13 volts rather than 12. So that should be perfectly fine. So let's just power off, and you'll see that the voltage will slowly drain and the meter will run down. And there we go, and then it's all powered off. So if we just take this cable off, so what I'm going to do is now I'm going to hook this up, or attach it to the printer so you can see how it mounts. Before I do that, I just wanted to briefly have a look at the ramps board. If I get this spare ramps board I've got here, you can see here, if I zoom in a bit, these are the poly fuses that I'm going to be replacing. So they're not really adequate for what is being, or in some cases they're not really adequate for what current draw is going to be used on the D8 connector, and the D8 connector is the heated bed. So was this D8 or D9, one of those. So if I just quickly grab the ramps board that we'll be using, you can see here that I've removed the poly fuses, and I've had a little slight problem there that the memory card got full on the camera. But what I was basically saying is that you can see here that I've removed the poly fuses from this ramps board, and then bridged the connections with some relatively heavy gauge wire. Now what we're going to be doing is obviously having two excuse me, two inline blade fuses. So we can remove the fuse protection from here as long as we're replacing it somewhere else in the circuit. So basically what we're going to have is we're going to have those removed, and then if I just grab a blade fuse, so here you can see this is what's going to replace those poly fuses. And if we just open that a bit, you can see that this is a 10 amp blade fuse. So we've got a connector on that end. I haven't fully decided on how or where these are going to be placed in the circuit, but let me just stop the video here, and I will connect up or mount the power supply, and we can see what it looks like. Okay, so I've moved the printer over onto the table. What I'm going to briefly show you is just what it looks like while I haven't got anything attached. So let me just lock the camera there, and I'm going to attach the power supply while you're watching. So basically what will happen is that lower bracket connects there. Now to get this power supply cover on, what I do is I locked one side in and then basically just manhandle it. It is a very, there we go, it's actually a very tight fit, so I have no worries about this falling off at all. And then what we have to do is just get the lower bracket into place. So that just popped in, and then if we just, there we go, so that lower bracket is locked in, this top bracket is locked in, and that power supply isn't going anywhere. So that's how let me just pan up a little bit. So that's how the power supply actually attaches to the printer. And like I said, so this is the top of this is where the inlet connector is, and this is roughly where the conduit will come out with the wires. And this basically goes up there, and this is where the ramps board will be. So it's a relatively small distance for some of the wiring to go. And I think I briefly showed in the last video some of the connectors that I've made. So this is one of the conduit holders, and then this is another type that I've made. So this one could effectively go here, for example. It probably wouldn't go here because, you know, it's not very far for the thing to go, but that basically hooks onto there like that, and then the conduit can go in that hole. And this one is basically just like a loop with a hole in, so this could, for example, go here, and then the pipe can go, the conduit can come up here through there, and it's held in place. So that's basically how the power supply attaches. If we now pan down and zoom in a bit, you can see here that this grey box on the side here is the SSR, and this is basically what's going to supply 12 volts to the bed when the ramps board has a signal come in the top here. If I just move that, you can see that what will basically happen, assuming that I just connect the fuse here, so this fuse for the heated bed would attach to the bottom there, and then this other end of the fuse would go to the bed. So you'd have one side of the heated bed here going straight to the heated bed, and then the other side would go up to the power supply, and then these two terminals have a plus and negative connection to the ramps board. So when the ramps board says heat up the heated bed, comes down here, switches the solid state relay inside, which then allows the 12 volts to flow to the heated bed. So if I just take this bubble wrap off and pan the camera slightly, you can see here how the heated bed will actually sit on the printer. Let's see if I can get that to focus. There we go. So we could potentially just connect this end of the fuse directly to the bed. So underneath there's a solder pad. That's one way of doing it. What I could also do is solder two short lengths of cable to the heated bed, the plus and the negative,
which go to about here, say, with a connector on the end, and then have a connector there connecting to that cable. I think that's probably the way I'm going to go, just so that if I ever needed to take the heated bed away and put a replacement in, it's just a simple matter of unplugging those two connectors and soldering two more wires on. So yeah, that's basically what this video is about today. I'm going to explore how I'm going to wire up the bed and how some of the cables are going to run, and then in the next video I'll hopefully have made some progress on that and I can show you that. But like I said in my last video, which was not about the NFire1, obviously with Kickstarter backed projects there is a slight delay, so there's not a lot more progress we can make other than sort of mounting things and looking at how we design brackets for the new extruders that are going to be part of the system. So that's what we may do. Obviously the next video will probably be on our 3D printed project. So yeah, I guess that's about all for today. I just wanted to say, actually, if you're not a subscriber, please consider subscribing, because when I reach 100 subscriptions I'm going to have a giveaway. There's also a straw poll at the moment to decide what the prizes are going to be, so I'll link that in the description. But yeah, if you can subscribe, I'd really appreciate it. And obviously you have a chance of winning. At the moment it's either a spool of filament or I'll actually print you something. So yeah, so that's about it really. I just want to say a massive thank you actually again to my filament sponsor, extrude.ltd. They've very kindly provided me with a load of filament, so that's what most of the parts in the NFire1 are going to be printed in. So you've got the cover there, and then the brackets, they're all printed in extrude.ltd orange PLA. So yeah, so that's about all for today. Thanks for watching. Please leave a comment and subscribe.